The type of sword popular during the migration period and the Merovingian period of European history, c. 4th to 7th centuries AD, particularly among the Germanic peoples, was derived from the Roman-era Spathe, and gave rise to the Carolingian or Viking sword type of the 8th to 10th centuries AD. The blade is normally smooth or shows a very shallow fuller, and often has multiple bands of pattern welding within the central portion. The handles were often of perishable material and there are few surviving examples. Blade length measured between 28 and 32, 710 and 810 mm, in length, and 1.7 to 2.4, 45 to 60 mm, in width. The tang has a length of only some 4 to 5, 100 to 130 mm, long. The blades show very little taper, usually ending in a rounded tip. Surviving examples of these Merovingian period swords have notably been found in the context of the Scandinavian Germanic Iron Age, Vendel period. Names and terminology. There is no single term that can be reconstructed as having referred specifically to the Spathe in Common Germanic. There are a number of terms and epithets which refer to the sword, especially in Germanic poetry. Sword and cutting weapon, whence sword. Beowulf has the compound Wagsword, 1489a, referring to a pattern-welded blade, the wave describing the wave-like patterns. A Meermaumsword, renowned treasure sword, 1023a, is given to Beowulf as a reward for his heroism. The same sword is called a Gesword battle sword later on, 2154a. Hieru, hero, Eeyore, tentatively associated with the name of Ares, identified with Tiwaz, by Jacob Grimm. Maki, Maki, Makir, Make, also Hildemus battle sword, found in Gothic as well as in Old English and Old Norse, perhaps related to the Greek Mukai alpha iotero alpha. In any case, Gothic Maki in Ephesians 6:17 translates this Greek word. The compound Heftmus in Beowulf, literally hilt sword, presumably describes a sword with an exceptionally long hilt. Slavic m is usually regarded as a loan from the Germanic word. Terms for blade, point, or edge which pars pro toto could also refer to the sword as a whole include biljo splitter, cleaver, West Germanic only, a bill could be any bladed tool, especially farm implements such as scythes or sickles. The compound gubill, wigbill, hildebill battle blade refers to the sword, but also the simplex bill is used. Hyljand, v 4882, has bill's bitty sword bite. The Hildebrand Slede has a parallelism establishing bill and sword as synonyms, v 53f sword to howen, Breton mit sinubiliu hue with sword, lay low with blade. Ramja edge, blade, perhaps Tacitus framea spear, lance, but Old Norse remjar means edges, sword blades. Ajo edge. Ord point. Gazo meaning cutter, the normal term for spear, but in the early period may also have referred to the sword, see Bergacker inscription. From the testimony of Germanic mythology and the Icelandic sagas, swords could also be given individual names. Examples include the magic sword of Hogni, named Danelif after the dwarf Dane, Skaldskaparmal, Skofnung, and Hviding, two sword names from the Cormac's saga, Nagling and Hrunting from Beowulf, and Maimung forged by Wayland the Smith. Early development. Roman Spathe. The Spathe came into widespread use in the Roman army during the 3rd century. It was during this time that the early Germanic tribes adopted the weapon. There are types of the Spathe, dated to the 3rd and 4th centuries, associated with the northern parts of the empire, Germania, such as the Straubingnitum type, but these are usually still classed as late Roman Spathe, as they are still found in a Roman military, not a native Germanic context. An early find of Roman Spathe in a native Germanic context, as opposed to Roman military camps in Germania, is the deposit of 67 Roman swords in the Vamos bog, 3rd century. Krefeld type. An early type of recognizably Germanic sword is the so-called Krefeld type, also Krefeld Geleb, named for a find in late Roman-era military burials at Gulduba Castle, Krefeld, Geleb grave 43. The military burials at Childerik begin in the late 1st century with the establishment of a Roman camp in Germania Inferior, and they continue without interruption throughout the period of withdrawal of Roman troops and the establishment of early Frankish presence in the mid-5th century. The Krefeld Type Spathe appear in graves from approximately the 430s through the 460s. In these graves, the exalted prestige of the sword is not yet fully developed, and some of them are surprisingly poor. They rather seem to still continue the tradition of military graves of the Roman period, of warriors buried with their personal weapon, the presence of a sword perhaps indicating service in the late Roman army. 6 Krefeld type swords are known from Francia, 4 from Albania, and another 2 from England. Merovingian period. A native industry producing Germanic swords then emerges from the 5th century, contemporary with the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. The Germanic Spathe did not replace the native Seax, sometimes referred to as gladius or ensis sword, but technically a single-edged weapon or knife. It rather establishes itself, by the 6th century, at the top of the scale of prestige associated with weapons. While every Germanic warrior grave of the pagan period was furnished with weapons as grave goods, the vast majority of the 6th to 7th century graves have a seax and slash or a spear, and only the richest have swords. Swords could often become important heirlooms. Aethelstan Aetheling, son of King Ethelred, in a will of c. 1015 bequeathed to his brother Edmund the sword of King Offa, died 796, which at that time must have been over 200 years old. Gold hilt Spathe. The gold hilt Spathe was a very rare and prestigious type of sword in the later 5th century. Specimens are known mostly from Alemannia, Pleidelsheim, Villingen-Endorf, but also as far afield as Moravia, Bluena. An Alemannic type is distinguished from a Franconian type based on scabbard mounts and hilt design by Quast, 1993. A total of 20 examples are known, 10 of each type. One of the Franconian examples is the sword of Childerik I, died 481, recovered from his tomb at Tournai. Some authors have suggested that Childerik's sword was a ceremonial sword not intended for combat, perhaps produced for the occasion of his burial. Ring sword. The ring sword, also ring Spathe, ring hilt Spathe, is a particular variant of the Germanic migration period swords. Ring swords are characterized by a small ring fixed to the hilt, not to be confused are late medieval to Renaissance Irish swords with ring-shaped pommels, also known as ring swords. Ring swords came into fashion in the last phase of the migration period, or the beginning of the early Middle Ages, in the 6th and 7th centuries. They were found in Vendel-era Scandinavia, Finland, and in Anglo-Saxon England as well as on the continent, Saxony, Francia, Alemannia, Langobardia. These swords were prestigious, prized possessions, probably reserved for kings and high nobility. The ring is interpreted as a symbolic oath ring. The design appears to have originated in the late 5th century, possibly with the early Merovingians, and quickly spread to England, from the earliest phase of Anglo-Saxon presence, and Scandinavia. The Beowulf poem uses the term ring mail, literally ring sword or ring ornament, and scholars who interpret this as referring to this type of sword can point to it as one indication that the Beowulf poet was still drawing from an unbroken tradition of the pagan period, as ring swords disappeared from the archaeological record with Christianization, by the late 7th century. Some 80 examples of ring-hilted swords have been found in Europe, 14 of those in Finland. First phase swords with a loose ring have only been found in Kent, England, whereas second phase is prevalent on the continent, especially in France but also in Sweden, Finland, 6 examples, and Italy. Examples include Continent. The Beckham ring sword, dated CAD 475 to 525, found at Beckham, Germany. Wunenberg Furstenberg, grave 61, 6th century. The Schritzim sword, found in tomb 78 in the Schritzim Alemannic Cemetery, Dillingen, Bavaria, dated to between 580 and 620 AD. The sword is a rare example of a blade inscribed with an Elder Futhark inscription, 4 runes arranged so that the staves form a cross shape. England. The Kent, or Dover, ring sword. Sutton Hoo ring sword. The Chesil Down 2, Isle of Wight, ring sword, early 6th century. Staffordshire Hoard K543, a silver sword ring fitting of fixed type, among the treasure found near Hammerwich, Staffordshire. Thought to be associated with one of the older pommel caps in the hoard, the piece has been dated to the early 6th century. Pommel cap K711 also displays characteristic damage caused by the installation and later removal of a ring fitting in antiquity, like the pommel cap from the Snisbach ritual deposit in Västergötland, Scandinavia. The Snartamo sword, found 1933 in Tomb 5 at Snartamo, Vestagder, Norway, dated to c. 500 AD. Vendel ring sword, found at Vendel, Uppland, Sweden, 6th century. The Valstenarm sword, found in Gotland, provides an important indication of the spread of the fashion. The sword was made in the early 6th century, and a ring was added only later, around 600 AD, damaging part of the existing hilt decoration. Transition to the Carolingian sword. In the 8th century, Frankish swordsmiths increasingly gained access to high-quality steel imported from Central Asia, where via import from Central Asia, where a crucible steel industry began to establish itself. The earliest types of Viking swords according to the typology of Peterson, 1919, are dated to the second half of the 8th century, while the Viking sword proper, and notably the Ulfberheit type, emerges by the turn of the 9th century.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.